What is your underlying fear when you're talking about ChatGPT or AI?
I'm actually concerned that it'll end up killing my own creativity.
So I think your fear is a valid one, and we can all fall victims to over-relying on AI. I see AI as an ally for creative thinking, so that then humans can focus more on the most strategic issues, right? Issues that will need more creativity, right? Solving bigger challenges.
Nausherwan Akram is an expert on strategy and organizational transformation. He's diving deep why artificial intelligence will never be able to surpass human creativity and how we can actually enhance our creative skills in an AI-driven world.
Look at the World Economic Forum, right? In their most recent study, they identified the top 3 skills in demand. Number 1 is creative thinking.
What is human creativity and what is the difference between intuition, sixth sense?
Creativity is actually opening your mind to different possibilities. They say that I trust my gut, and often that gut leads to something, better and bigger. And you have to listen to that inner voice, right?
What if AI comes up with truly intuitive, sixth sense based ideas?
One thing I'm very certain of.
So, what is the process? I mean, if someone wants to be more creative?
So first, obviously, real starting point would be
Nausherwan, thank you for joining me this morning. You are an expert on creativity. I've got a couple of concerns today for which I'm actually having this conversation with you. And by the end of the conversation, I want those concerns to be resolved, hopefully. Number 1, I am a huge fan of AI, specifically ChatGPT. ChatGPT is my best friend. I use it all the time on my mobile. I talk to it and I crack conversations. I'm actually concerned that it'll end up killing my own creativity because it gives me ready-made answers. So we need to figure out if I'm doing the right thing and if I should change my approach. Number 2, if I am not killing my creativity, how can I optimize my own human creativity going forward? What are the takeaways that I can have from this conversation? That's something that I'm looking forward to. So let's start the conversation. I'll pose this simple question to you. What is creativity and what is the creativity created by AI?
excellent, Tariq. Firstly, thanks for having me here. I think it's a great initiative that you're taking, and it's a pleasure to be here. Before I answer your question, what I would love to do is also ask you a question, being a coach as well, right? And I would love to understand what is your underlying fear when we're talking about ChatGPT or AI.
It's very simple that I'm relying heavily on ChatGPT to create ideas for me, to give me solutions to problems that I'm posing to it. And it gives me, phenomenal answers at times. And I'm concerned that if I become too dependent on it, will I remain creative myself?
Yes.
That's the fear.
Absolutely. So I think what will help the conversation is if we actually define, right, what is human creativity and what's the role of AI as a starting point. For me, the simplest definition of creativity is essentially creativity is all about innovation. It's all about solving the problems, and it's obviously thinking out of the box, right? And that's what gives you the edge. It's how you can be different. If you look at AI, of course, it's relying on, the pattern thinking. It's about automating, right? And it's about looking at what we already know in this world. So I think your fear is a valid one, and I think we can all fall victims to perhaps over-relying on AI. But the way I see it, the way I state it, is that I see AI as more of an ally for creative thinking. And I think creative thinking is going to become even more important as a skill set.
Okay, all right. But I'm talking about the practical reality here. I have a problem. Suppose I get up in the morning, I want a solution to that problem. I pose that problem to the AI. It gives me the solution. I mean, it's just helping me in a way to give me the solution. Where is it that I am using my own brain now?
Absolutely. That's a valid concern. And what AI is doing very well for you is obviously automating a lot of the information that is already out there. But what you might lose out on is, forgetting the human connect. Because at the end of the day, we can't underestimate the power of the human connect. And what it might make you think about, cast your mind back to when, for the first time, we had the car satellite navigation system come in place, right? And of course, that was like the best discovery of the time because it could help us navigate and get from A to B. But then often there are also times when the navigation system is going to misguide you, right? I think there's a similar metaphor with AI. So that human intervention is always going to be important, right? And how you use AI, right? And that's where creativity comes in, right? What questions you ask of, the ChatGPT, for example. That's where I think the is going to be the key differentiator going forward. But mark my words, I mean, look at the World Economic Forum, right? In their most recent study, they identified the top 3 skills in demand by 2027. Guess what? Technology adoption is also one of the top 3 skills, but it's number 3. Number 2 is analytical thinking, and number 1 is creative thinking. So what that is telling us is, right, as the AI, the evolution of AI, right, and of course the speed of change, creativity is going to become even more important as a skill set.
Thank you, everyone, for your great support and comments on each of the episodes. We've been working really, really hard to bring you great guests and content. And it's only going to get better from here onwards. Your support means a lot to us. Do hit that subscribe button. Let's make it happen and make it count. So, what I really want to understand here is that what is the basis of the creativity for AI? Let's take the example of ChatGPT again. To my understanding, it goes around the internet, pulls the information,
Yeah.
and creates an answer for you based on machine learning
Right.
and gives the answer to you. So what I've come to understand is that it's not really creativity. What it is essentially doing is it's just pulling in the information which is already out there,
Absolutely.
right?
Absolutely.
To us, it probably looks like that it's giving something new, but it's not.
Right.
It's just pulling the information together and giving it to you in different words. Maybe you can ask it questions and gives you the answers. Is that how you see AI creativity as well at this stage?
Absolutely. I mean, I think, again, let's not make a mistake. AI is going to be an immensely helpful tool because the speed with which it can process so much data, that's an important lens that we must have, right? But is it going to replace human creativity? Because at the end of the day, human creativity really relies on the human connection, the human expression. Most importantly, it's about building trust. It's about people, right? And that I do not see in my humble view. I might be slightly biased because that's the work I do, right? I work with leaders, I work with teams. And I always see that this human connection, that trust, the coefficient of trust is going to be very critical. And that's where the human creativity, I think, is definitely going to be very, very vital and critical, right? And it can't be replaced. Let's look at AI, right? AI is not going to be able to understand the context. And when we're solving problems, AI might give you answers based on the data set that's existing today. But when we're looking at the future, right, we're thinking about things like your gut instinct. What is that telling you? So I think these are some areas where perhaps AI might develop, but I don't think it's going to give you those deep insights that come out when you work with humans.
So what you're saying is that since AI is pulling out the information, giving you that information back, it's not creating new ideas, which are out of the ordinary. Human brain can do that because the human brain relies on intuition. For example, you probably have sixth sense.
Yes.
You bring in ideas, new ideas out of perhaps meditation, or do certain things where you can really be creative and you can connect the dots in a certain way which AI cannot.
Absolutely.
AI is developed by human beings and it gives you everything back what you put in it. Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely right. AI is going to be there as your
Yeah.
ally, but it's not going to replace the human creativity.
Okay. And when you say ally, what do you exactly mean by that?
So it's a friend that we can use, right, to get that perspective on the data, get some insights. But if you're only solely relying on AI, I mean, let's make it real, right? We're both fathers, right? We have children. And in this day and age, right, children come up to us, they're using ChatGPT as well, and they think they know the answers to the questions. But they might know the answer for the wrong question, right? That's what I mean by context. And that's where the human mind comes into place, right? So whereas AI could be great on the left-hand side of the brain, right? The analytics. But the right-hand side is where the human creativity lies. And I think that's always going to be there, as is also validated by the World Economic Forum statistics, right? It's going to become more important because we're going to have more complicated world that we live in, including the fast rise of the technology.
So what is AI going to help us with, essentially? I mean, if it is going to be a friend, if it is going to be a toolkit, will it create, let's say, automation or do some things at workplaces? Can you explain that a little bit more?
So I think AI is going to be very valuable when it comes to repetitive tasks, right? Or where perhaps it's going to be replacing humans as well, right? For things which are non-value added, transactional things, but you need the power of AI. So that then humans can focus more on the most strategic issues, right? Issues that will need more creativity, right? Solving bigger challenges. And that's, I think, we'll be able to utilize that time rather than spending the time on doing repetitive tasks.
Okay. Can AI be used to enhance human creativity in a way?
It's what questions you ask, right? For example, you gave the example of ChatGPT. Certainly, you can use ChatGPT to, for example, to understand, get different perspectives. But I do not feel, from my experience, that it's going to completely replace the human creativity, which is going to come through the trust, right? So if you look at organizations, right, organizations is going to consist of people, and then the creativity really comes with diverse opinions, right? That's where out of the box solutions come up with. I mean, look at the examples of, for example, Uber and Kareem when they first came in, right? What did they come up with? They come up with a unique problem to solve, right? What was that unique problem? They were creative, right? They found what we call that white space. And that problem was, how do you make transportation more accessible using tech? So that the human mind came up with understanding the need, right? And then they use tech as an enabler. So artificial intelligence would be an enabler, would be an ally, but you will always need that human inputs there, right? Because at the end of the day, that's how we connect. We're social animals.
So I think what I've come to understand from this brief conversation is that people are often mistaken that AI is giving you creativity. I don't think that is the case. What it is essentially doing is it's faster. It gives you answers in flip seconds, and it probably replaces a lot of brainstorming sessions that you potentially could have with, let's say, a team of people, number of people in a meeting room. Instead of having those 10, 15 people around you giving you or coming up with different ideas, it gives you the ideas that are already out there on the internet, for example, in a few seconds. And it saves your time, it saves your energy, it saves probably expense as well, in a way. So it does give you solutions, but what it doesn't potentially give you is what a human brain can bring forward. For example, just taking the two examples of Uber and Kareem you mentioned.
Yeah.
I personally think that AI could have potentially given a simpler idea of Uber and Kareem based on the existing information out there. Maybe could have calculated in a certain way, but eventually it comes to human beings as to how to implement it.
Correct.
It that connection needs to be there as well. It can throw an idea, but then understanding that idea in a certain way and implementing it is the human brain again that brings it to a function, I believe.
Gallup did a survey, right, across the world, and they wanted to find out employee engagement, right? You'll agree with me. Employee engagement is one of the key barometers to understand how successful your organization will be, how performance driven it will be. And basically that survey told us that employees who felt that their creative skills were used more were 3.5 times more effective, right? So you mentioned about also, in terms of people owning the action plans or, initiatives, right? How will it come about if we completely only start relying on artificial intelligence and kind of just forget the human connect and the human element? And that's why I think, so you want more, engaged employees, because that will lead to more productivity, right? More innovation, right? More success for the company, but also, the culture of the company. One of the things I think also that AI might struggle, right, is the cultural context. Because you mentioned you need to listen to the voice of the employees. Not all the employees are the same, right? So will AI be able to clone all the different types of cultures, for example, you have in a company, right? So these are things which we have to watch, but not at the cost of neglecting the human voice, which I think is going to be always central.
Okay, so based on what I've understood from you is human intelligence and creativity will remain the center of attention. If anything, AI is just going to be used as a tool, and it'll probably give us more opportunity to become more creative. And I should, when I use AI or ChatGPT, I should keep this in my mind that, get the answers, but think on my own as well. How I
Agreed.
use those answers is very important, I think. How I utilize the information posed to me is the key here. I think it puts me on an advantage, I guess, in this situation.
Definitely. Definitely. It gives you a great starting point,
Yeah,
as
yeah.
long as that's not the only thing you're relying
Yeah.
on.
And especially if people become lazy after taking input from AI, it's probably going to destroy their careers in a way,
Absolutely.
right?
Correct.
And that's I think very important, because I've seen that some people are blindly relying on AI. They use ChatGPT for emails or so whatever tools that there are in the market at the moment, they are blindly using. And I think those are the people they need to be worried about, not the people who are actually using this to enhance their value proposition, I believe.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Interestingly, KPMG coined a term called learning agility. And that is few years ago, right? But I think that is very, very useful for us as well to keep in mind today. I think is the speed with which we humans continue to develop, even adopting AI as well, right? But I think that learning agility is the key skill.
Yeah.
Of course, creativity is going to be one of the skills that you have to continue learning and up your game.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's move forward and talk about human creativity, since we've established that it is going to be the center of attention, and you've quoted the example of World Economic Forum. So let me understand again, what is human creativity, and what is the difference between intuition, meditation, sixth sense. I just want to understand, because these are the terminologies used quite often in terms of generating ideas and finding solutions to problems.
Yeah, absolutely. So creativity is essentially about innovative problem solving. And it's about being able to come up with those solutions which are going to be much more different and much more valuable to solve our critical challenges, right? So if you compare it, for example, with intelligence, because you can also ask the question, what's the difference between the two, right? So intelligence is more based on your learned skills and learned knowledge. And often you're trying to use more of the logical side of the brain and your analytics to find the right answer. Creativity is actually opening your mind to different possibilities, right? And that's really when for example, if there is a problem to solve and you can only find one solution, you probably aren't being creative. Intuition is a very powerful, I think, a leadership trait, I would say. Intuition is not always based on data analysis or data analytics, but often it's your sixth sense, right? It could be based on your past experiences, but often if you look at a lot of entrepreneurs, right, they say, I trust my gut. And often that gut leads to something, better and bigger. And you have to listen to that inner voice, right? It could be a solution. It could be a novel problem, right, that you're trying to solve. But it's very important to listen to it.
Now, in terms of the generation of ideas, I mean, that is the core of creativity, I believe, right?
Absolutely.
And they can come at any point while you're walking. In my case, I get a lot of ideas when I'm walking outside somewhere. It's very hard to find time actually these days. Weather is getting better, and I should be walking out and about in the evenings, I guess, to get more ideas. I get a lot of ideas when I go to the restroom, for example, and wash my hands on the wash basin. I'm just trying to understand what is the connection here.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Actually, I get my best ideas when I'm in the shower, for example. I think what it could be perhaps is that often, in the day-to-day lives, right, we're just too operational. The mind is at work, right, continuously at work. And just this act of you kind of dislocating yourself from your routine and perhaps going to the washroom, and then the act of cleansing, your hands, for example, the act of cleansing, perhaps it has an impact on your brain to just
Yeah,
relax it for a few moments.
yeah, yeah.
And that's where your best thinking, your natural thinking comes to play. What's your experience? I mean,
Yeah, I think the way I experience it is it's the state of mindfulness. When you are getting busy with something, suddenly your brain, starts throwing ideas, getting busy with something which is mundane, which is standardized, where you don't have to apply your brain. So you're doing something and suddenly, flash of ideas start coming in. And what I've found very important is that it's very important to write those ideas on the spot.
In the
And
moment.
yeah, absolutely. I keep my mobile, by the way, with me a lot of the times. I self-message myself on WhatsApp. When I get an idea, I just type and send myself a message
Yeah.
just to make sure that I can catch on the idea later on. That's how I experience it. Not sure what is your experience on this. I mean,
No, I think one thing I can certainly relate with you is that these best ideas don't last for that long. So capturing them in the moment is very, very important. I also normally just WhatsApp myself, right? Because if I don't capture them, they tend to disappear very quickly.
yeah,
But they're definitely very novel ideas.
yeah. So let's understand people part here. I mean, some people they say are more creative. Some people are less creative. Some people are more intelligent. Some people are left-handed, right-handed, and what is it that we're looking at? Can creativity be taught? Can it be nurtured? Are you born creative? There's so many things that are coming into my head. If you can just shed some light on these
Yeah, I
areas.
think, look, based on my experience, we're all born creative, right? If you think about the best creativity comes from children. Why is that, right? Often, at times, they ask us questions we don't have answers for, or we didn't think of those questions. I think what happens is as we grow up, right, and depending on what cultures you grow in, we tend to get biases, we tend to get told what's right, what's not right. And often, at times, of course, that's start to hampers or creative abilities. So my perspective is, look, I look at creativity as a process, right? Wherever you are, whatever stage of life you are, you can learn to become more creative, right? It's for me, it's a process, and process always has some steps. Provided you have the will for it, and you're again sort of an agile learner, I think anybody can become more creative. But of course, there are certain enablers and there are certain bottlenecks or hindrances that stop us from being creative.
What I've felt is that as we grow up, our ideas become less and less genuine.
Yes.
We are, polluted by the environment around us, and
For sure.
it's very hard for us to actually to come up with something which is unique.
Yeah.
Children are not, on the other hand, they're not biased. What's your experience on this?
Spot on. I think as we grow, of course, as I mentioned, also depending on what societies you grow in, right? Some societies are too closed, right? Because I've spent a lot of time, growing up in the West. So of course, their creativity is much more encouraged, right? Simple things like, for example, choosing your career. You have the options and you kind of follow your passion. That obviously has an impact. But also when you're working in organizations, right? It's also many things at play. For example, what are you rewarded for? Are you rewarded for getting things done on time? Is it efficiency, or is it really coming up with great ideas, right? So there are different factors at play. At the end of the day, that determine, right? It's a very interesting topic because I do a lot of work in this space, right? We even do profiling of people in organization and teams to help them understand their creativity, right? Where do they stand today? So that often tells us that most people, unfortunately, are not creative, but perhaps they've been not trained to become creative or encouraged to become creative. And that's why they play more on the other side of the kind of the wheel, right? Which is more the analytical or the logical side.
So we will talk about the process. You mentioned something about the roadblocks.
Yeah.
What do you think, apart from us being influenced by our environment, what are the other roadblocks that you see?
I want to talk about, especially when it comes to organizations, it's the culture, right? One of the things when we're working with leaders, there's a term called killer phrases. And that's quite interesting. As by the name you can suggest,
Yeah.
it's killing the creativity of people. And often, Tariq, it's a habit that we formed. And with habits, we don't kind of realize it. It becomes part of our daily routine. So we do it out of habit, but we don't understand that we are actually in those process of conversations we're having with our teams, with our colleagues, we are actually killing creativity. So killer phrases would be things like, let's say, if you came up to me and, you're reporting into me in the organization, you came up with a brilliant idea in the best interest of the organization. And suddenly, in response, I give you a statement. For example, I say, what did you have for breakfast today? Or, you know what, Tariq, this is not your job. I think you're better off focusing on your job. or we don't have the budget. So what happens when I gave you this response? What's the first impression you got when I gave you this response? How did it make you feel?
Yeah, I'd feel discouraged,
Right.
obviously.
And that's the impact of killer phrases, right?
Yeah.
You're going to feel discouraged, right? And perhaps next time you will be less willing to come up and share your ideas, right?
Okay, that's a solid roadblock, I would say.
I think the importance of creativity, people just think it's only for the creative industry or artists to be creative. But if you come to the real world, you actually realize that it's going to be very, very beneficial for you if you were more creative, right? So I'll give you example, even if for an individuals, right, looking to progress in their career, if they were the person who had those best ideas, right, and if they were able to communicate, right, those ideas, they're going to get, firstly feel more engaged with the organization, but they're also going to be recognized, right, as the person who always has the best ideas. And we tend to find in every organization, there are those people who still have that gift of being able to see new problems, new challenges, new opportunities that other people can't, right? And they're recognized for it.
AI. I think it's personally what I think is that it's even more and more important because your standardized problems are going to be solved by the artificial intelligence.
Yeah.
And if you're just there to sort of, solve simpler problems, you're basically undermining your own career or your own professional life. So it's better. This is the highest point that you really need to pay or start paying attention to becoming more and more creative, because AI is going to put you to a very, very tough challenge.
Correct.
And if you are a person who doesn't pose solutions to problems beyond AI,
Right.
it's going to be very tough.
Absolutely. And I call it the human edge, right? Because if you think about it, Tariq, AI is a tool, right? It's going to be available to the masses. It already is. Like ChatGPT, anybody can use it, right?
Yeah.
So what's your extra edge?
Yeah.
And that's where I think that creativity is going to help you build on AI, right?
Yeah.
So AI is already there, accessible by everyone. But what's something special about you, right?
Correct. And that's the reason that you must now pay attention, I guess, to training yourself, learning how to be more creative. Let's get into that discussion now. So what is the process? I mean, if someone wants to be more creative, someone thinks that, they need to now give tough time to the AI instead of the other way around, how can they go about?
Yeah. So first, obviously, real starting point would be the realization, which I think we already discussed, the importance of creativity. So for me, it's a little bit like you must understand the why first. And I think if there is the clarity on why it is so important to become a better creative thinker, that's a great starting point. But then we can focus on kind of the what and the how part, right, that follow. The key part around creativity is first, embracing the process of divergence. And for the audience, in simple words, divergence means creating many, many ideas, many, many possibilities. Rather than just stopping with, I found the answer, and that's my one answer, how can you open the mind up? So it's again getting better at the ability to be able to diverge, which means coming up with many possibilities. Your first 5 ideas might not be the best ones, but if you keep at it, right, you come up with 10, 15, right? Either you're through yourself or through other people that you work with. And that was the power of involving, humans and connecting with other people. You will come up with better ideas. And then, of course, the third thing is around, you also have to converge, right? And convergence, you can also be creative, right? How to take people on boards, basically.
Okay. So we're talking about creativity in organizations. We have problems and we need solutions for those problems. And there's a process that you're suggesting that we could potentially follow. Now we have problems in real life as well. I mean, outside work. Does it apply to any situations outside work as well? The solution that you're providing here?
Oh, absolutely. I think creativity can be applied to day-to-day situations or personal situations, as well as obviously organizational challenges as well. But I think the key thing to be mindful is that jumping from a problem, a symptom, and directly going to a solution. And that's where creativity is very important. For example, Einstein very famously said once, right? If he had 60 minutes to solve a problem, he'll spend 55 minutes defining the problem and 5 minutes to find the solution. So just for a moment, just reflect on what he said And what do we do as humans when we are faced with the problem?
We want the solution
We
straight away.
exactly. So we jump to solutions. So I think there is a lot of wisdom in what Einstein said, because what happens often is that we are not addressing or getting to the root cause of the problem, right? And if you get to the root cause, and that's also needs a little bit of creativity to collect the right facts, right? And make sure we are open to divergent or different point of views of people that we have in an organization, or even if it's yourself, right? Look at your situation in a 360 degrees from all different angles. And then if we come up with solutions, one, those solutions will actually solve the real problem rather than just fighting the symptoms. And of course, those solutions will be more owned by yourself and also by your teams, right? Because they've been involved as part of the problem solving process, right? From problem identification to defining the root cause to formulating the solutions.
This is a beautiful process. I'm in. But what I see is that it's very, very hard for us to put this process in place and follow it on a regular basis. It's sounding good in textbook, but how do you apply it in real life?
So I think with the team, of course, because I'm a practitioner of this process, right? And I have a lot of experience here. It's a case of you'll be amazed of, again, the power of getting people connected and connecting at the human-centric level, right? How quickly people engage with the structured process. And once you start applying the process, what you find is that you gain speed, right? Yes, it sounds as if, oh gosh, I'll have to allocate this much time for identifying the problem, this much time for getting the buying in of people. But what you realize is, without the process, right, where do you end up? And actually, with following a structured process, where do you end up? So I think if you're looking for positive outcomes, if you're looking for team engagement, people owning what they're saying, the process will work. Now, with regards to, do you want to use it for every problem? Of course not. There are some problems which are very straightforward. And of course, you don't have to go through the entire steps of the process. But often in the complex day and age we live today, most of the problems are, they do require inputs from different stakeholders. And that's why this process will be very, very effective. I think the same case if it goes for an individual, because I do a lot of work with individuals in executive coaching, right? I'm coaching senior leaders. And often you find, people are in their own silos and blind spots. And it's the power of asking the right questions that sparks the creativity. Because guess what? Nobody's asked them those questions before. And we are so solution oriented. And to your point, jumping towards solution, just by slowing down, it will help us to speed up. That's one of the phrases I often use in my training. Slow down to speed up.
Yeah. So identification of the problem is the number one key. And you've quoted a brilliant quote by Albert Einstein. I think spending 55 minutes on trying to find the problem is the key here, I think. And a lot of the times people get the solutions wrong when they jump to the solution straight away. Now, just talking about the time constraints when you have problems, often people are caught off guard. There's a problem and there's a very, very little time to solve that problem. And that's the order of the day in corporate world.
Yeah.
When you're short of time, how do you approach handling that situation using this, let's say, methodology?
Yeah. As a leader, look, this is obviously a real challenge often because, time is never on your side. But I would say it's a simple case of, even if you don't follow the entire process, for every stage of the process, if you can ask a leading question. So let's say you sat in a meeting room, you could be the one asking the question, guys, do we know what problem we're here to solve for, right? So it's a case of even that question will trigger a thought process. It'll get people thinking, did we choose the right problem, for example? Or asking a question like, for example, right, have we thought about all possible solutions, or are we just thinking about one solution that we are comfortable with, right? Because that's the only thing we know from the past that has worked. So even if you're not following the entire step of the process, it could be those simple questions that will trigger the mind. And I think that's at least what you could do if you're short of time.
So the essence is find the problem first.
Absolutely.
Identify the problem.
Correct.
Before you jump to the conclusion.
Correct.
And you can perhaps look at the problem in various ways.
Yeah.
and propose multiple solutions. And that's
Correct.
where the creativity, real creativity, will kick in. Now, in terms of the quality of ideas, I mean, how do you identify one idea is better than the other? I mean, there are 10 people in the room, they all have ideas. How do you judge or assess an idea and call it more creative?
Absolutely. So I think the first thing here is when we say divergence, what we're prioritizing is quantity over quality. Now it might sound counterintuitive, but it's a little bit like, a funnel. Like a funnel looks like this. So if you have to have a good things coming at the end of the funnel, you have to fill the funnel first. If the funnel is only filled with 5 ideas, what are the chances of you getting the best ideas? Probably less. As opposed to if you fill the funnel with 50 ideas, don't you think the chances of some great ideas will be enhanced? That's exactly the concept with divergence. So with divergence, you're inviting, you're creating the ambience and environment for people to come on with many ideas. But you don't know until you let people really open up, right? Because often people are stuck. They've never been even asked, Tariq. Let me tell you this. This is one of the biggest gifts that is so underutilized. And so if you prioritize quantity first without judging the ideas, you will be amazed at the creativity of your teams. You will be absolutely amazed. And I'm speaking from experience, right? Of hundreds of workshops I've done where the teams themselves are amazed how creative they were, right? In terms of finding solutions. Then, of course, what we do to answer your question is once you've done the quantity, then, of course, we will use a criteria because not every idea is going to, help solve the problem. Then we obviously develop consensus on what's the criteria. So criteria could be, for example, how expensive it's going to be to implement the idea, how long it might take us to implement the idea. Will it take us 2 years or it will only take us 2 days, right? What will be the impact of the idea on the problem, right? Is it a high impact, medium, or low, right? What will be the acceptability? So then what you do is you come up with the objective criteria and then you measure your ideas. So then as a team, you get an understanding, okay, well, listen, this is something we can do in the next 2 days, for example, right? This is something which probably take us 1 year, but it's still worth implementing because it'll have big impact.
I'm going to throw a little bit of a twist here now. How do you bring in AI and ChatGPT in this situation?
Absolutely. So part of the process is fact finding, right? And fact finding is that critical pathway between initial problem finding and problem definition. That's step 2 called fact finding. And I think where ChatGPT and AI could be fabulous is it could help us collect all the information and data that's out there relevant to a problem, but we use it as part of fact finding, right? So that could be great help. It could save us a lot of time, right? So we can incorporate it as part of the process of creative problem solving.
Great. I guess ChatGPT could be one of the individuals sitting in the room,
Yes.
right? Giving its own ideas. I mean, against those 10 people, maybe its ideas become more effective in a way. I mean,
Absolutely.
if those 10 individuals are not able to beat the ChatGPT in this situation, I think ChatGPT could potentially give you solutions,
Yeah.
right?
Absolutely.
Now, so it's competing with human beings in this situation, I guess.
I think that lens is very important, right? If we use the word compete, again, it might undermine, the human capability. And I think all we are saying here is, right, so there is humans behind AI as well, right? So at the end of the day, we need to make sure that people are encouraged more and more to kind of share their point of view and perspective. But we basically position AI as a great enabler and as an ally in our search to become even more creative.
Now, people are under stress all the time. They have, let's say, mental health issues. They have burnout issues at work. How do you handle creativity in situations where people are struggling at work and you're expecting them to be creative?
That's a great question. I suppose in any organization, you're going to find people, who are either burnt out or stressed. Is how they look at creativity as an enabler to help even find their solutions to their stress, right? So I think creativity has a space in problem solving, as I think we've already demonstrated. So if they could understand that, if they were able to embrace this creativity, right, could it help them solve their own problems in a better way, right? Could they use creativity to open up their minds to some issues which are preventing them from solving, So I call them sub challenges. So I think this is again comes back to the awareness, which was the initial point in our discussion. I think it's very important people realize that creativity is could be their best friend, right? And if they were more creative in understanding their problems better, that could help them find solutions as well.
Wonderful. Now, just connecting the dots between different disciplines. Now, I'll use the example of Apple. Apple, as its products goes, for example, iPhone. When I was reading the biography of Steve Jobs, I mean, what I've come to know is that he brought humanities and science together to come up with the most beautiful design of a phone. And what you see in Apple is the design. What they've done is that they've connected two different disciplines, science and humanities, together to come up with a product. I don't see that happening quite often in the real world. People don't connect the dots. They don't see that combining different things together can bring a solution.
Absolutely right. Absolutely right. And my comment here is, so when we do creativity, one of the key skill sets, so one is idea generation, right? But the other, to what you're pointing to, Tariq, is basically the ability to connect the dot. And we call it the skill set of conceptualization, where you're able to take different data points and kind of make sense of the problem in a very unique way and then come up with a very unique solution towards that. So again, that is also covered under creativity. I'll give you a real example, right? If you've been to an Apple store, I go to an Apple store quite frequently in London, for example, and you have a problem with your iPhone, you walk up and you meet one of their, tech geeks, for example. And so what is quite astonishing is, of course, they've solved your problem and you already have the confidence they will. But the point I wanted to highlight is the questions they ask you, right? And they're asking very smart questions. What you think is perhaps they're asking you questions just to solve your problem. Yes. But they're also taking in your inputs to help them design the next, line of products, right? And that's the key, right? So those questions, again, it comes back to the questions they ask you, which helps them come up with their new products, right? And it informs their new product development process. So I think you mentioned Apple, and I think that's also where they're very, very smart in how they go about this process. Because at the end of the day, we are the users, right? And they want to use our experience. And often the creativity lies in complaints. That's the other thing to realize, right?
Of course, those are the best opportunities to find solutions and come up with creative ideas to do things better.
Absolutely.
Now, I love the example of Uber. I love the example of Airbnb. I mean, that's a huge one. I mean, these businesses are very simple and straightforward. I'm just thinking that if AI could have given those business ideas, how would people have taken those ideas forward?
Yeah. Great point again. But I think the challenge I see there is essentially that it's a little bit like if I give you an idea, right? How much do you believe in that idea? How much do you trust that idea? Because I gave it to you. It's not your idea. So back to the point as well that came up earlier is about ownership. It's about excitement. It's about feeling the passion to do something. Yes, again, AI would be great to take in ideas as another lens that we're using, but it also has to be the human creativity part as well that has to be utilized and leveraged so that people own and feel passionate about implementing those ideas. Because at the end of the day, we don't just want a list of ideas, right? We want things getting done. And that process is obviously helped if people buy into the whole process of solving that issue.
Correct. And just linking it back to the AI and the biggest problem the AI is posing, in my view, is that it's giving you ready-made ideas which are already out there. And if you heavily rely on those ideas and stop using your own creativity, it can really, really undermine the chances of your success. And that's a huge drawback of creativity. And that's where I think the World Economic Forum has come into the picture. And that's the reason I believe that they have actually, rated creativity as the number one factor going forward in the future.
Yeah.
Now, I'd like to understand the challenges that you've seen across organizations. Of course, you go across different organizations and you've trained many, many people what are the biggest challenges in real life that you've seen that people have been facing in terms of, making their organizations more creative, in terms of connecting the dots, in terms of, simplifying things?
You know, a lot of people think that they already know the answer, and this would be a waste of activity. Why even bother asking the teams? Again, an equation that I learned early on is learning is equal to 1 divided by ego. So if you understand the equation, if the ego is high, the learning is less. I think we started the podcast about the importance of learning new skills. So I think one is ego, right? So in which case you already have converged. You already know the solution. So there's no time for creativity. Why should we even be more creative? The other challenge is obviously is a lot of functions are working in their own silos. And that's a big issue, right? Because at the end of the day, does your customer really concerned? Is he concerned about the different functions and their issues? Not really. The customer is more focused on the service that they're getting or the product that they're receiving. So how to break those silos and how to get people on the same page, aligned, I think that is one of the other big bottlenecks that comes in the way of. And that obviously means that all of these people have to speak the same language. Within creativity, we use 3 words which we call the language of innovation. And that's often one of the big takeaways. We call it how might we.
What is that?
How might we is basically a term coined by Dr. Min Basseder, who is the inventor of simplexity thinking, which is a methodology of creative problem solving with a 40-year track record. And essentially what this does is, normally people come and let's say if you ask them to find a new way to do something or find, let's say new customers or new revenue streams, the first response might be, no, we can't do this, or this cannot be done because. And so to change that negative mindset into a positive mindset, what we do is we rephrase that sentence starting with these 3 magic words. How might we? And then whatever your problem statement is come next. So how might we find new revenue streams? So what this does is it has an impact on your mind that tells you, you know what? There might be other solutions. Maybe I don't know. And that encourages collaboration. That helps us bust those silos.
And how do you handle the ego?
Ego is always a tough one. Well, one thing I do as a facilitator is I give guidelines before the workshop, right? Or before the engagement with the client. And I make sure when we kick off the client engagement, we go through the guidelines. And one of the guidelines is, please leave your titles, egos, and phones outside the session, right? But egos and titles, we want to make sure we make that point very clear, and we have to remind them, right, that everybody's ideas matter. And those titles and egos, we just want to be mindful of those. So that's what you can do. And of course, during the course of the engagement, you do a check-in and just check in with the team. How well are they following the guidelines?
The way you've explained this to me, it seems that, there are practical realities in organizations, at least, to the extent that we're dealing with people. And people have their egos, people are victims of their own habits or prisoners of their own habits, bringing in change in terms of, certain process where you can create ideas or create the creativity. It's very challenging. It seems to me it's very challenging. What is the easiest way that you think it can be achieved without, disturbing people in terms of their egos and without, making them realize that, we're actually taking these steps towards bringing in more creativity?
Yeah. I think there is no magic bullet. If you ask me if there's a magic bullet we can give to every person in the organization and then they'll be fine. It's change management 101, right? And change is always going to be faced with some resistance. I think what we do or what we try to do is really inculcate a better understanding of the bigger purpose, right? Why are they doing what they're doing?
Very important.
And so then they start seeing the creative thinking as one of the biggest enablers. I think if people are clearer on the purpose, they buy into that purpose, and then they see creativity as one of the biggest enablers that's going to help them achieve the purpose. That's the way we kind of can work with those people. But it does take time, right? It doesn't mean in 2 days those people will become different human beings. But I think it's then about them seeing those results that will encourage them. And the results could be, of course, financial, but there could also be behavioral changes. For example, people living some of the workshops we do on creativity, one thing I ask them to do is basically, okay, please go and apply at least one learning from this engagement. And when they practice it with their teams, they're suddenly astonished that their teams before that they were not creative at all. Suddenly, they just kind of become different people altogether and start putting forward some, mind-blowing ideas, which could, of course, save the company or save them money or help them, grow their business further.
Now, talking about the future, we are discussing AI, which is still in its initial stages. What if AI comes up with truly intuitive, sixth sense based ideas? How are we going to handle that?
Well, the future is still a crystal ball. I think time will tell. But one thing I'm very certain of, Tariq, I'm convinced that this the coefficient of trust and working with people is never going to disappear, right? Yes, AI will become, more useful for us, for sure. But I think the great risk I see in all this is that disconnect with with the humans, and I think that part, that deep connection, that deep understanding, that is always going to be important and pertinent to help us understand the full context, because you can't solve problems in an island. You have to understand the context, and therefore those human connects are going to be always very significant.
And what will happen to the people who don't understand, will not understand, and will become dependent on AI?
Yeah, that's going to be obviously a reality as well. And I think for those people, I think they will unfortunately have a very siloed view of the world. And of course, I worry about kind of the next generations, right? Because they'll only be very myopic and only reliant on tech, and unfortunately lose out on the human dimension.
What would they do?
I think they will still survive, I'm sure, but there might be a lot of struggles, right? I feel if you're only totally reliant on AI.
One final question that I have is that dealing with change, dealing with bringing in process-oriented approach. Of course, we can develop the habits, but in real tough situations, where time is of the essence, where you're dealing with firefighting situation, do you see the role of creativity still coming in? Because people tend to jump to solutions very, very fast.
Right. Okay, so look, there are 2 to 3 things which are constant, and I'm sure you'll agree with me: death, taxes, and change, right? And if change is a constant, and we accept that, right? We talked about AI. So, what we need to do as individuals and what organizations need to do is become more adaptable. And I'll just very quickly define adaptability means how can you be proactive when you're dealing with change rather than always being reactive. So it's very interesting. You mentioned the word. We have to be reactive. So I think it goes back to the intent. Let's say if it's your organization, would you like to be a future ready, adaptive organization, or would you like to be a reactive organization, right? So the choice is yours. If you're choosing to be a future ready, proactive, and an adaptable organization, then creativity is going to be your biggest enabler, right? Make no mistake. So that's a choice that you have to take, right? But if you want to be still reactive, then then I think we can ignore creativity at our own peril.
And it's a huge peril that we're facing, I think. Now, what is one advice that you'd give to young generation and let's say entrepreneurs and senior business leaders?
I think one biggest advice I would give is that we need to be more present in the moment. What I mean by that is often we miss out things even under our nose, right? So we need to be more conscious of the fleeting, precious life of ours, right? And so we need to develop the practice of slowing down to speed up. And that could be as simple as every week on a weekend or whenever you find time is just reflecting, right? And reflecting on the past week and seeing, how are you gearing up for the future, right? And what could you do better? So that power of reflection, the power of deliberately slowing down, I think it's going to help us make better sense of this world, which is fast changing around us.
And I guess when you slow down a little, you become more creative as well. I mean, because then your subconscious starts throwing ideas. I can relate it to the fact that whenever I go on holiday, for example, I tend to relax a little, and then my subconscious starts throwing ideas, and that's where I become very, very creative.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
if we can adopt that in workplaces, and recently I published a post, for example, having a bit of a relaxing time in the office as well. For example, power nap,
Yeah.
slowing down a little.
Yeah.
It can actually bring in tremendous results in terms of making us more creative.
Absolutely. And that's why I focused on the word deliberate, because there is intent behind it. Because as you already mentioned, right, life is so fast and there's so much noise out there. You really have to cut down on that clutter. That's really the me time. And if you can create it, I think you're going to be better for it.
Fantastic. Beautiful advice. Thank you so much, Nausherwan. It's a real pleasure having you today.
Likewise, really
Thank you.
enjoyed the conversation.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.